Welcome to another Perspectives podcast. I'm here with the man himself, Mr. Chase Brown. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, man. I'm doing good, dude.
You doing good?
Yeah, a little on the tired side.
Yeah.
A little hungry.
Yeah.
But that just makes this all the more exciting.
I think Jesus said something about being hungry. Something about being filled or something. I don't know. I feel like I read that somewhere one day.
Yeah, man. Maybe we could get filled during this podcast.
Yeah. I'm hoping for that. So here we are with another podcast. Usually whenever we do these, there's always a special guest that we try to bring along. On today's podcast, we have the man himself. I actually just learned this today, but he actually really enjoys the yellow starburst. I don't know why, because no one likes those. But he seems to be that guy who does.
Yeah, I would say he could be considered a professional dancer.
Okay. Yeah.
After all of his work over in Europe.
Yeah, that dancing ministry was very strong. I was blessed by him many times on Instagram.
Saw all the videos and everything, man. You know, me and him had a little tag team there in the streets of Innsbruck.
Wow.
So it was dope. But
Yeah. So today we have Mr. Jake Moore himself. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. What's going on, guys? Good to see y'all today.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me on.
The king of getting that bread.
Yeah. So what does it mean to get that bread? What is that?
I mean, it means many things.
Okay.
I mean, the daily life of getting that bread can be biblical,
Good.
be physical.
So good.
Could be getting that money, however you want to, however it perceives to you.
Wow.
Bring home the
That's how you
dough.
gotta take it.
Bringing home the dough. Wow.
So good. Multifaceted.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I was going to say multi-purpose, but that works too. Yours.
Yeah, man.
English isn't my first language, so I was going to think about these.
Hey, yellow starbursts are good.
Wow. I can't believe
Shout
you
out
said
to the
that.
yellow
Like, I don't
starburst
understand.
and pink and orange too. Those are
What about the red ones?
They're okay. They're just overrated to me.
I agree.
Overrated.
It's a hot take. But I
Okay,
agree.
we'll go straight into what we did
It's been
talk
a good
about. Yeah, so Jake Moore, who are you, man? Like, what do you do? Tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm 22 years old. I'm a senior at the University of North Texas.
Yep.
Congrats, man.
Go Mean Green.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's
Wait.
around the corner.
Hold up. Pause. What school do you go to?
University of North Texas.
Is that the Mean Green?
That is
Yeah,
the Mean
man.
Green.
I
Joe
feel like
Mean
there's
Green.
someone else who also went to that school,
Yeah.
but I can't remember.
Someone
mean,
on
you know,
this table,
yeah,
right? Someone around here, I think.
I don't know who else went to that
I
school.
can't remember. Maybe
but-
he transferred. I don't know.
Yeah,
Something like that.
Okay, sorry
Nah,
for
man.
interrupting you.
Dude, I'd never do that to you and T, man.
Wait, Chase, you
Never
went there?
transfer. You know that, man.
Really?
You
Oh,
know that, man.
man.
You
I'm
know,
sorry.
along with the famous Dr. Phil and Lecrae.
really?
So, yeah,
Wow.
we got some special alumni going through
Yeah,
UNT.
including you guys, legends.
We might be tier 2.
Okay, cheers.
Maybe.
Working your way up. I'm sorry for interrupting. Continue.
No,
UNT.
man, you're
Yeah.
good. You're good. Yeah. So I go to North Texas. I work at a gym called the Color Point. It's a recreation facility. I'm customer service there.
There you
So
go.
shout out to the Color Point.
Yeah.
I attend Gateway Church, and I'm a part of a young adults Bible group on Thursdays called Jesus on Thursday.
Shout out JOT.
Shout out JOT.
Shout out JLT.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit about me. Very laid back person. So
Yep.
yeah,
So you're a dancer.
yeah.
Huh.
I guess now I can label myself as a professional dancer.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, you went worldwide with it. Like,
Hey, man,
Straight out
perspectives
the gate.
worldwide.
that's true. That's true.
That's why we got him on here.
That's true. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So we brought you here today to talk about your dancing.
Yeah, absolutely. I got some techniques for you guys. Got a lot of it.
Yeah.
A lot of styles, everything.
So besides dancing, so let's start with this. What are you studying at UNT?
So it's called Recreation Event and Sports Management. So it's essentially event management and sports management combined.
Yeah.
So the gist of it is event management, however you
Yeah.
want to look at that. And, you can work in the sports industry, fitness industry. I mean, anything to do with some kind of event planning you can work in. So, yeah.
Yep. And I had my
Stuff.
time in the recreation, event, and sport management program over at UNT. So
Yeah,
it's a fine program.
it is.
Plenty of great professors there. plenty of learning and fun times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's dope.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man. So just again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really.
Yeah, dude. Really appreciate it. Hope this could be good for you. Just kind of talking through everything that you've been through. I mean, not just on the trips, but maybe even just revisiting some of your testimony and stuff like that. Being able to allow like the Holy Spirit to show you some things that maybe you haven't gone down. So I think that'd be a cool thing to start with before we get to the trips and what we want to talk to you about those. Just sharing a little bit of your testimony, sharing a little bit of your story, and just how you came to know, the Father and walk closely with Jesus.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I guess the typical American life is growing up in a Christian home.
Yeah.
So that's my story. Went to church, part of it was want to please my parents, but also, I was interested, always knew, at least in my mind, that there was a God, but I always hated the kids' ministry. I hated it. I always went to go sit in my parents', auditorium, and I would always be so fascinated with whoever the pastor was at the time. I think it was Jack Deere was his name, but I would always sit there and just be so fed, and I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, not knowing a clue what he's talking about, but Spirit was talking to my spirit. So I grew up, going into middle school, high school, and early college, living a life, definitely calling myself a Christian, but not walking it out, and not, the normal good things like prayer, worship, going to church on a regular basis. I just did it because I had to, but not because I wanted to. And so, as I get older, I go into my sophomore year of high school, and I'm, I wouldn't say depressed by any means, because I know that's like a real clinical issue, but I was definitely on this more sad side. Saw the glass half empty more so. But anyways, my dad one day decided it was time that he told me his testimony, and he went through quite a lot growing up with his family, and his dad abusing him, and his whole family, and just witnessing how he grew up is very harsh in itself. But as he got older, he dove into drugs, and he actually overdosed on drugs, and had an encounter with the Lord outside of his body.
Wow.
And so I heard that as a sophomore in high school, and it freaked me out. I was like, God, you are real. Like, I believe in you. But at that point, I didn't know what to do. So I guess you could say I didn't really give my life, because I was just in condemnation still. I was still trapped in my own sins, everything you can think of. And so just being so fascinated with the afterlife, I started YouTubing all the man goes to hell and comes back, and tells the story of heaven. And I was so fascinated with it, and even the rapture and all that stuff. And so through high school until about my senior year, I was just reading books left and right on the rapture. And man, I really closed myself off from everybody and tried to dive into God without reading the word, without praying, without going to worship, going to church, anything like that. I still battled a lot of stuff, and still dealt with a lot of guilt, shame, and condemnation. And eventually having that kind of identity over yourself through high school, especially, of the religious kid, wasn't something I was really proud of. And so I just decided to step back. And when I stepped back, I dove back into partying and going back out and drinking and trying to sleep around with people. And that was my motive every day, was just to find the next high, if you will, without doing drugs, looking to the weekend, couldn't find joy in the week. And, all the meanwhile, I knew that God was real. And I didn't know what to do with it, if that makes sense. I just kind of sat there and was like, I don't know what to do, but I'm just going to live my life the way I do. And I got to a point, and this is about 2017, where I became really broken. And I remember I was on vacation, and every night we would get ready before we would go out to the clubs, and we would all just be doing our own thing in our rooms and stuff. So I would go sit on the balcony by myself and just look up in the sky and stare and look at God's creation and be like, God, like, I'm crying out to you. Like, that was the first encounter I ever had, really crying out to God, saying I don't know what to do with my life. Like, I need purpose, I need direction. Like, I don't know what to do. And so not hearing anything at the moment directly, my buddy comes in and I just start talking real with him about life and what I've been going through. And he was like, man, you should totally come out to Arizona. I'll give you a job. You know, you can drop out of school if you want to. You can do it online. Come make some money, you know, full time, and, you know, have that fresh start mentality. And so I was like, man, that sounds great. Like, that's what I need right now. I want to do it. So I get back home from that vacation, and I go to my parents and when I go to tell them that, I'm like, man, this is not going to go off well, because my parents are going to say, you need to finish school, you know, quit being dumb. And anyways, my mom's being a normal mom, and she's worried, but my dad is actually fine with it, which kind of shocks me. You know, he was like, degrees don't really guarantee you much anymore. So, you know, if you have yourself a job, why not? Take the opportunity. If you fail, come back. It's okay. Like, it's part of life, you know? And he goes, but you got to tell me why you're doing it before you leave. And so I told him what I was going through, you know, which was I didn't have any kind of purpose or meaning in life, any joy, any direction. And so I needed to find that. But I put that in dropping out of school and just going to another state and finding a random job. And he turns around and looks at me while he's cooking and says, it's because you're running from God. And he turns back around and starts cooking. And then in my mind, for the next few days, the Holy Spirit was just replaying that thought. It's because I'm running from God. It's because I'm running from God, over and over and over again. And I couldn't escape it. And so I ran back into a good friend of mine who I hadn't seen in about a year. And he had just recently got plugged into a church. It's Eric. And I really saw Jesus in somebody, and it was in him. It was, for the first time, I actually saw Jesus in someone ever. And, you know, I sat there and I looked at him and I was like, man, what happened to you? And he's like, Jesus, man, he saved me. And so I was like, man, I thought you were always a believer. But he's like, no, man, like, I really gave my life. I'm fully committed. And so without telling him that, that's really what I wanted, you know? And so come late August, I was at Gateway, and I think that was whenever it was one of the Bring Your Friend weekends that they had in 2017, where it's more geared towards salvation. And I remember listening to a testimony, or a message at Gateway, and I recommitted my life, you know, because like I said, I grew up in a Christian, so recommitted my life, and about a month later in September, on the 23rd of 2017, I got baptized. And so from there, it's just been a faith journey. Like, it's been so amazing. Like, I have found purpose and meaning in life, and it's Jesus all the way, you know, however that ends up working out in my life, career-wise, doesn't matter. Like, he is my purpose in my life. And so it's been amazing to travel and go to different churches, and, you know, my first mission trips and stuff like that. So
and it's so cool to see how God can, like, meet us all where we're at. Because I know that, like, some people, which I can say was, like, I mean, by his grace, part of my testimony was, like, him covering me with, like, his grace, like, ever since from a young age. And then, like, some people getting down, like, really addicted to drugs, really, like, down a lot of, like, that route, and God being able to meet them there. And then with you, even in, like, the kind of, like, questioning or confused times of, like, you know, it's not really like I feel, you know, suicidal or addicted to all these drugs, but at the same time, it's like, it's not like I'm living abundantly or in obedience to how he's called me to. And so him having a way to, like, reach all of us where we're at, like, is so good.
And I feel like a lot of people can really, you know, relate to that testimony, kind of like what Chase is saying in so many different ways. Because, I mean, as you're speaking, I'm like, man, I can relate to so many different things. You know, also kind of growing up in that Christian household, and just some of the things that I was dealing with. And, you know, when you said, you know, being known as that, I guess, what people consider as the religious kid. You know, I mean, I relate to that, you know, because I guess kind of growing up and being in school, you know, a lot of people, you know, probably thought that of me just because of, you know, the whole, I guess, being a Christian and all of that. And, you know, especially when you're in school, you're just trying to be your best, be a good Christian, be an example and all that. So, yeah, no, I really relate to that, man. I think that's, man, just kind of what Chase was saying, where the grace of God to be able to meet us in different areas of our lives. I think that's incredible.
Yeah. You know? And then like something going off of that is like one of the things that we're tempted to give people an excuse with, or even sometimes ourselves with, is like, you know, the truth of, you know, God will meet me where I'm at. You know, you don't got to change to come to God, everything like that. While that's true, once you come to him, he doesn't want you to stay as you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Is a key thing, because so many people take that as just like, oh, I'll come to God. Like, I don't need to change at all. Like, I don't need to walk in obedience. I don't need to give up this this addiction to like pornography or, you know, alcohol or anything like that. You know, like God just loves me as I am, but it's just like, yeah, he loves you as you are, but at the same time, it's not like he's not calling you to be better and to go through the process of sanctification, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, like just wanted to mention that, because that I think that's something that you're walking in obedience in, like, which is so cool. But as well, like that's something I feel like I've heard so much that I don't think we've brought up that thought on the podcast yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's so cool that's related to your testimony. But yeah, I think you, Josue, I think you could ask him this, since you've been like his small group leader and things like that over the past couple years. Always shout out to JOT. But yeah, being able, I don't know, because you've had a little bit of inside track. What are some of the things you think would be cool to ask him how things have been kind of ever since that experience over the last couple of years?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's, I mean, I guess because I met you and Eric, you know, kind of at the same time at the retreat.
Yeah.
And then inviting you guys to group, and then you guys coming and just being faithful to coming and building relationships ever since then. And I think one thing I've always, you know, kind of known and seen about you is just, you know, Jake's always been the kind of person to ask questions, whether it's not in group or just personal questions like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, you know, he'll just ask questions, or just being very encouraging, being very strategic and encouraging, you know, and just kind of seeing, you know, kind of like what Chase mentioned, this process of sanctification, this growth that you've been on over the last 2 years or so. And I feel like even since I've known you, you've changed. So I can only imagine over the 2 years, you know, that kind of growth that you've experienced. So I guess the question is, what would you say to someone, since we're on this topic, to people that were in your spot, you know, in that position of like, you know, growing up, having your same story that I also had, you know, being a believer, but not really being a believer, I guess you could say. You were just kind of like, everything was by title. Right? You didn't pray, you didn't read, you didn't do nothing. It was just by title. What would you say to those kind of people? You know?
Well, first off, thank you guys for the nice comments. But what I would say is, and this is one thing I've been learning is, you know, part of the mission trips is, if that's whoever you are, you know, just ask God if he's real. Like, and he's going to reveal himself with your pure heart that you ask him. You know, if you really are seeking him, he's going to reveal himself. However that may look like in your life, he will, because he loves you and you're his kid. But I just encourage you to continue to press in. It's never by works based, but just more of a surrender. And once you surrender and you give your life, it's that switch in the spirit where everything comes alive to you. And it's one of those things you can say, you know, it happens, but until you experience it yourself, you know, there's nothing like it. So for me, for example, I hated worship, I hated prayer, mainly because I thought what people thought about me. And then I didn't ever read the Bible because I didn't know what the heck it was about. When I got saved, those things, I'm like crying now reading the Word. I'm crying in worship, and I love praying, you know, just talking to the Lord. And so I just encourage whoever is listening, and just to surrender it all, man. You got nothing to lose, you know. And just, if you don't even want to take that step, just ask God to reveal himself to you, because that's sometimes all we need is just that encounter. So
that's so good. So then kind of progressing through faith, becoming closer to Jesus, starting to walk more in obedience. you get these mission trip opportunities, which was Berlin. Was that your first mission trip?
Yes.
I can't remember. So you get these opportunities that come up. So would you want to share a little bit just how, we'll start with Berlin, just how that opportunity came up, what the experience was kind of like leading up to the trip, and then we'll be able to talk about the trip from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say it was back in March or April, and I had just recently told my mom about my desire to go to the Nations, which I had previously known a couple months prior to that. We didn't live together at the time, so she was like, "Oh wow, that's awesome, Jake. Like, step into that." And so, like a week later, she gets an email about mission trips from Gateway, and she was like, "I know it's a sign from God because I don't get those emails at all. I never have." And so she sent them to me, and I was just like, "Wow, this is awesome." And I opened the link up, and all I saw were 3 mission trips. I don't even know what the bottom one and the top one were, but I saw the middle one. It was Germany, and it said evangelism. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to do it. So I remember I told my mom, I was like, let's just go for this one, I guess. And so I think, it was that week. I was actually at a worship night at my friend Chris's church, and Josue gave me like a little word about, I think it's time to step into it. I think it's something along those lines, which you said, which had to do, I don't know what exactly it had to do with in your end, but on my end, I perceive that as the mission trip. So I feel like the Lord confirmed that. And so building up to it, we had our, our meetings. And the funny part about that is I never knew it was in a, what do you call it? Creative arts outreach. So all I saw was evangelists.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's go, paid for it, everything. And then I get to that first team meeting, and they start talking about this drama, and they said, all right, you're going to be Jesus. And I thought they were joking. So I start laughing along. Like, yeah.
I'm sure it was that boy Paul who volunteered you
yes.
to be Jesus.
Yes, he's like, you're tall. And I was like, what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of freaking out, but it worked great. It was nerve-wracking for sure, but getting into that trip was awesome, just building up to that experience. And then what was some of that other half of the question? I apologize.
Really just kind of like what the experience was, just kind of leading up to it in terms of, like you talked a little bit about like the Lord confirming to you, you going on it. But maybe just some of the things that was leading up to the trip that you were hoping to get out of the trip, or different things like that.
Yeah. So definitely going into my first mission trip, I wasn't even sure what to expect, especially on this end, being outreach or a creative arts outreach in particular. Didn't know how many people we're going to see. Didn't know if we're going to be like on a stage, like in a building, or if we're going to be outside or what. But just went in there wanting to see salvations for sure. That's like the main thing I wanted to see was salvations, like left and right, like thinking it's going to be like the harvest is ready, like let's go. That was my main thing. And then going through it, just going through the flash mobs and the dramas with the teams that we were out there with, and I definitely opened up a lot more. So it was amazing. I didn't see firsthand any salvations, but our group experienced quite a few. So I wasn't necessarily disappointed. But it was one of those things that's kind of like, oh man, I really want to experience that, for sure. So just being out there in front of people and risking it all, if you will, by dancing and doing your drama and really just giving your life, if you will, for Jesus was like amazing. It was a great experience for my first mission trip, and so really everything that was there, from like the little things of how they take care of you as far as where you sleep, what you eat, I just took that and I was like, okay, that's a mission trip experience, which totally went the opposite way of the second one. But that was a great experience. So
I think sometimes we underestimate how much, well, I guess this is going to have to do with my question for you. Performing in front of people.
Yeah.
When you're not a professional dancer or actor or whatever, when you're not in the arts like that, like, that's tough, especially, I mean, you might already feel pressure about evangelizing, and then now you have to perform or dance or act on top of it. Like, what was that like for you? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be totally honest. It was nerve-wracking for sure, for sure. And that first day, one of the owners, the founder, excuse me, came up to our group, and he was like, because we went with a partner called European Initiative.
Yep.
And we were with their surge team, which is like 20 young adults. But anyways, our first day we get out there to this Alexanderplatz is the name of it. It's like a little square. There's hundreds of people around, and he was like, all right, let's worship and pray, and we'll get out there. And they started naming the sets, and he was like, before we get out there, I just want you guys to remember, there's so many people watching, no matter what you go through, just remember that eternity is at stake here for people. Before you know it, after the first flash mob, there's going to be hundreds of people surrounding you. And out of the whole conversation that he gave, that's the only thing I caught. And so my heart started pounding.
Yeah.
Hundreds of people. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
So leading up to that, nerve-wracking. But stepping into it, it's one of those things that when you take that step of faith, and you're there like that, that's when the Holy Spirit just gives you that comfort.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to experience. But it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed the heck out of it, being out there and dancing and just having fun, being goofy. And then the crowd was just very interactive because that's their culture out there in Germany. And then doing the drama, becoming very funny to very serious. And a lot of people got the meaning, but not the deeper meaning, which was Jesus. And so that really was amazing to see. As you stepped into it, it was definitely comfort, but before, very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
And would you say you grew from that experience, by stepping outside of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I definitely grew, I would say, in just trusting the voice of the Lord. Absolutely. That was key. So I stepped out in that.
Yeah, because that's something that we've talked about previously, on the podcast, has been whenever we do step outside of our comfort zones, one, we grow in trust in the Father, because He shows His faithfulness over and over again. But then as well, we grow in potentially our tangible earthly gifts, for you dancing, but as well in our spiritual gifts, which I think we could get to maybe more for the second trip. But it's so cool, for you on your first mission trip experience, for I should say God, number one, to provide you those types of experiences.
Yeah.
And then you in that stepping in obedience. It's so cool because a lot of people, I think back to my first mission trip, I was so nervous. I was just I don't really know how all this stuff goes.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to be timid and just kind of sit in the back. And if anyone kind of asks for help, I'll be able to help out, but not being proactive. And so it's so good to be able to do that. And so so we talked a little bit about the structure of the trip. I think we've been able to outline that pretty well. What do you think was some of the big takeaways? I think that'd be good that you were able to take from the trip. Either words that people spoke over you, experiences that God spoke to you through, or just direct words from the Father.
Absolutely. So the first one I'll start off with is probably the biggest one for me. And it was, I would say, about 2 months leading up to the trip, I started realizing that I had a really, really, really bad lower right back pain.
Yeah.
And if I sat down for 45 minutes or stood up for 45 minutes or longer, I got this pain that just shot down my right leg.
Yeah.
And so meeting with that European Initiative team, Surge, we would go 2x2s, out after the plays and the dramas and all that stuff. We would go out and evangelize in twos. And so we mixed the groups up. So it was Gateway and European Initiative, and I met this kid named Connor. Super cool guy, man. But we clicked instantly because we watched the same healing videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like Tom Loud, Peekaboo, Todd White, of course.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome just experiencing that. But then 30 minutes later, my back started hurting. And so I was just bending over and grab my back, and I was just ow, kind of to myself. And he was like, "What's wrong, bro?" was like, man, my lower right back's hurting really bad. And he was like, bro, you didn't say anything? I was like, we didn't talk about these healing videos the whole time. You didn't bring it up at all. And I was just like, oh, dang, I didn't even think about that. Like, I guess not.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the enemy. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so he sits me down, and he measures my legs. And my right leg, was shorter by like 1.5 inches. And so in Jesus' name, my leg grew out instantly.
Amen,
and I felt it and saw it.
Amen.
Since then, I haven't had back pain. And
Dude,
so, yeah.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and
Goodness.
so it was just so amazing. And he was able to say, like, that verse, I think it's in Mark, where it says, freely you have received, so free to give. So in the name of Jesus, through my life, it's been able to really cool on that trip specifically to see legs come out in Jesus' name, like right off the bat. And so,
dude, praise God, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. So that was probably a big takeaway, my biggest one.
Yeah.
I mean, I can even attest to that because I remember whenever he came back, we had group, one of the Thursdays when he came back, and after group, Jake and a couple people from group that disappeared. I mean, I wasn't like looking for them or anything, but
man, you're the leader. You're supposed to be responsible.
I know that's what I'm
for
saying, right? And so some of the leaders wanted to have a meeting, so we're going to one of the rooms, and I like walk in and there's Jake and 2 other people, and I'm like, what are you guys doing here? and so I just kind of walk out, and they're like smiling and whatever, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on here. But yeah, no, I just kind of hearing from the individuals, Jake kind of shared that testimony with them, and freely you have received, so freely you give. We're going from faith to faith,
Right.
And someone was able to pray for him and just seeing healing in his life, and then just seeing how Jake was able to pray for some of our group members and them experiencing healing as well. So God kind of using your friend Connor, and then God using Jake to also do the same thing, and so yeah, just that's just a testimony to what you experienced there. I mean, that's such a big takeaway that I saw with my own eyes as well.
Yep.
When Jake came back, so I was like, wow, where'd this come from? So yeah,
man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And what do you think are some of the other takeaways from that trip?
Absolutely, man. One in particular was just learning the heart of the Father, I would say, and just seeing how
good.
It's easy to get wrapped up in your mind that God's mad at you, whether you do things or not. At least for me, battling that condemning mindset. And so just seeing, the leg example, seeing legs grow out, but just the fact that people outside of me, in our group, you're seeing healings and salvations. It's like God is loving his kids. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And what Jesus did on the cross is final, and it's beautiful, and it's our only hope. But to really have a revelation of that, like in the middle of your mission trip, is like mind blowing. It's great because you really see how much he loves the kids. And so having that perspective was probably such a key thing to like really grasp and take hold of and try to remember and savor that moment forever. So
good, man. And yeah, I think I think that's something that like we model whenever we go on trips is, the Father is like the actions of the Father that's motivated by the Father's love. Because any love that we have for people comes from the Father. As it says, I think in 1 John 4, if I remember right, like if you don't have love for people, then the love of the Father is not in you. And so I think there's a way that we can kind of turn it back to where it's like, if you do have love, then that is the Father's love in you. And so being able to live out what it means to have the Spirit fill us is so good, and being able to share with people over in Europe like the message of the gospel and the fact that the Father does love them is, a physical representation of that, and a verbal representation, but as well like in that like God can move like spiritually like through that, and well, whenever he obviously wants.
right.
but as well, even through that, because people could be so more open to receive his love than they would have been before. And so it's so cool to be able to do that like on trips. And I think Josue, like that was something over in China that I think was cool as well, with us being able to care for the people over there, be welcoming to strangers, which I think is a key thing. And even that's outlined in the story of Abraham, of the importance of being welcoming and loving to strangers. But yeah, I think that's something that we learned over there that you can learn on any trip.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, kind of just speaking about, love and God's love. And, you want to go on a mission trip and pour out and do all these things, but knowing that God changes you while you're there.
Yeah.
I'm sure because Chase has gone to, 51,000 by now, but, he's probably
Something
been,
like that.
he's been changed so many different times, just seeing God move in different ways, each and every single time, and I think it's great, for us who, for those of us that do go on trips, to go in anticipation for God to change you, as you're doing all these other things and wanting to serve and minister and evangelize, but also kind of having that heart to where it's like, God, change me as well, because He cares about you as well as you're doing all these different things. So I think that's awesome that you guys got to do that. How long were you guys there for?
10 days.
10 days,
all in Berlin. So there's like 12 districts, I think, in Berlin. So we went to a few of them, but Berlin. So 10 days.
Yeah, such a solid trip.
Were there any challenges, I guess, for you? It's something that we always ask. Were there any challenges for you during the trip? Did you get them like, what am I doing here? Which I'm sure you didn't, but like anything like that?
Oh, yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, as far as it, doing the drama is concerned, at that, when I first approached it, I was like, dang, like watching the other group do it, like they were pros almost. And so we had to step in there with our 7 people, but the wall was like 15. So we had to improvise a lot and do it a lot differently. But it worked out well. But really, I think anytime you go on a mission trip, this is what I've heard from other people, is that the enemy will always attack you because you're on assignment, like really. And so you could always have that mindset of, what am I doing here? Why am I not seeing all this stuff happen? But you just got to remember that it's the lie from hell. And he's just trying to intimidate you and, silence you as best he can, but he can't with the word of God in your life. So if that answers.
Yeah, dude. I think that's such a good thing. And I think something that'd be good to kind of go from here is you had a pretty cool opportunity of with this while you were over in from a high level viewpoint, being able to go to Berlin, and then just a few days later being able to go on the Swiss Alps trip with Gateway that I was able to go on with you, and so really, really unique opportunity in that, and so I think it'd be cool, however briefly you'd want to, first just to share the story of how that opportunity even came up and just everything that God did in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say it was February. It was after a one night, which is the young adult service at Gateway. And I was sitting there just talking to some of our group. I think it was actually Imbo. I was talking to Imbo. And some girl just came up and was like, hand me this flyer. She's like, you should totally go to this. And just handed it to me, and she walked away. And I was like, okay, And I looked down, and it was a mission trip. And I was like, oh, wow, like, that sounds amazing. Like, I actually want to pursue that. And so, I go home that night, and I just set it on my dresser. And eventually, the Berlin trip starts going through, and I'm not even thinking about this mission trip on the flyer.
Yep.
And so this lady at my work is a missionary, and she was like, I'd love to help out, just contact me, and I'll pray about it and see how much money we're able to give you. And so I was like, wow, thank you so much. So I contact her a couple weeks later. We have a couple, conversations back and forth, and then I just don't hear anything from her. And I had told her, though, it's kind of my fault. I didn't set anything up online for payments or anything like that, so she was expecting me in person. But anyways, coming to Berlin, I get a text one of the days while I'm out there, and it's from one of our group leaders. Her name is Angelica, and she was like, hey, just checking in on you, seeing how you're doing. Hope it's going great. It's awesome to see how you're on that trip that Gateway offered you that night at one night. And I kind of sat there and I was like, did I read that right? I was like, did she say that? And I was like, yeah, it's been a blast. Like, I'm actually not on that one. I'm in Berlin, blah, 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 blah. And so that very next day, I actually get an email while in Berlin, obviously, from that lady who wanted to donate. And she was like, hey, just checking in. I know you're in Berlin right now, but I wanted to donate.
Yeah.
And she was like, so here's some money. Sorry I wasn't able to get to you, in person. And so I was like, I texted my mom and I was like, hey, is it bad to like take money while you're on the trip? And she was like, no, let her be blessed by blessing you, for the trip.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. So I told her, awesome, thank you so much. And got that money in, and that next day we were standing in line to go to the Holocaust Museum, or one of them, I should say. And this lady in our group asked me, she's like, hey, what is your heart like as far as a career goes, but and just in life, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, man, I really, what I'm finding out is I just want to travel the world and share the gospel. Like, that's all I know to be true right now is that. And so she was like, yeah, God's going to make it happen for sure. Like, it's just what your desire is, so don't even worry about it. And so that very next morning, our leader, we're at breakfast, and he checks his phone, and he's like, hey, guys, just got an update from one of our group leaders that this trip needs to be filled, and since somebody dropped out at the spot and they need to fill it, instead of it being like $2,800, it's only $900.
Yep.
And it's a Swiss Alps trip. And right then and there, it's like all the dominoes fell over and all the dots connected like that. And my spirit like jumped, and we were at this table, and everyone all 7 of them kind of just looked at me and were like, you need to go on that. And I was like, I know. I was like, this is it. And little did I know that's the flyer that I had from the beginning in February.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
the Lord just making a way through work, getting off, finances being overpaid for during that trip to be able to fund for my next trip.
Yeah, which those who have fundraised for mission trips knows that never really happens at all.
I bet. And so just all those dots connecting in a row was just amazing to see how God worked that.
The reason I made that, okay, so she gave you money for the trip you were currently on and didn't know about the one that was coming up.
Not at all.
Correct.
Wow.
Neither did I. That was previous.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay,
So,
it all just connected now. You're going through, I'm like, oh, wow.
yeah. So I took all those things as confirmation. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, my goodness. And even the people that supplied money, it's one of those God moments where, like, you look at your bank account, you pay back everybody that helped you, and people are like, no, you don't owe me any more. This is all you gave me, but I still had more of my money and more of my account. And I was like, this is supernatural. Like, this isn't my money. It's nobody else's, clearly.
Yeah.
So that money perfectly poured into this $900 trip. That was just
dude.
an absolute blast. And so
Yeah.
the leader of that group, was the lady that handed me the flyer. I forgot to mention that. It was Ruth.
Oh, Ruth.
Yeah.
Ruth Beeman.
Yeah, back in February.
Goodness. Legend. But dang, dude. And I think it speaks so much just to how, one, like, God equips the called. Like, that's something that from the start, like, he had planned for you to be on the Alps trip. And he made a way for that to happen through your, like, willingness. And I think even openness to accept, like, the blessing of the woman that gave you the extra money.
Yeah.
Because if you may have been, how can I say it? I think in general, like, closed off to receiving that blessing.
Yeah.
But then from there, maybe even a little bit prideful to say, like, oh, like, I already have all my money. I don't need any more money. I'm good.
Yeah.
Which sometimes we're kind of tempted to because we want to have that self-sufficiency. Then that wouldn't have happened. As well, honoring your parents in that and, like, seeking their wisdom.
Yeah.
And following kind of what they were feeling from the Lord. And so it's so cool to see that just kind of happen, because it's definitely not your doing that made that happen. Like,
Right.
It was never even within your imagination
Right.
to go on that Alps trip. And yet God had a way and knew that you were going to be there. It's so cool.
Yeah.
And so I think something that maybe could be cool, I know was something we really wanted to talk to you about, was because it's very unique for someone to go on 2 mission trips back to back. Because how many days do you have in between?
4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, dude.
4 days.
4 days. Crazy. And so what would you say your mindset was like? Because when did you commit to the Alps trip?
It was that same day that my leader of the Berlin trip said everything was happening that was going down.
Yeah.
granted, we were 7 hours ahead.
Yep.
So everything I was asking, texting people, and things got confirmed that I was able to go. So he sent all the information in. By the end of that day, I was confirmed to go.
And about how many days was left on that Germany trip?
3,
a couple. So
yeah.
So then, so you had a couple days to kind of look at it. But what would you say from when you found out to you coming home to you getting ready for the Alps trip? Like, what was your mindset coming home and then like going into that second trip?
Yeah, absolutely. So going home, I was like, it's very sad. You know, like I enjoyed meeting all the people, the search team, you know, of course, my team.
Yep.
And going back to quote unquote reality, you know, but then realizing halfway through the flight, oh, wait, I'm going on another trip. Praise God. So, being sad really was kind of, you know, just saying goodbye, you know, and that whole experience, my first mission trip ever, was my feeling leaving. And then during the 4 days while I was here, I had 1 day of work. So I got to speak to my supervisor, and she was like, yeah, you need to go on this trip, just encouraging me and stuff. So I had more hype going into it, you know, and I was surprised because that first trip was a beating. I mean, it was like, outreach was from 1 to 6, but really it was from like 10:30 or 11 to 6. So anyways, I rested up as much as I could, getting back to time zone. And then that like day before where I finally stepped in, I was like totally hooked back on American time. And then that day of when we leave, go back through everything, we landed, I think it was Madrid.
Yep.
Is that right? I was like, oh gosh. It's like, no.
And we had like a whole straight day in Madrid of like running around.
9-hour delay, you said? Is that what it was?
It was, yeah, like a 9 or 10 hour layover. But like the whole day we were around, like running around and stuff.
Yeah. And so, yeah, just going into that, I was pumped, though, honestly. Yeah. Besides being so physically tired, like sleep-wise, I should say. Yeah, I was pumped, but I was tired. But I was ready to go at the same time. It's kind of a weird combo.
Exactly.
So.
And yeah, and Josue, I think something that like that we mentioned before the podcast that could have been something is sometimes when we come back from mission trips, like we come back with maybe a little bit of like regret of, oh man, I wish I would have done more of this. I wish would have been more obedient into this. And for you, Jake, like being able to have the opportunity to immediately, maybe when those emotions are kicking in, to leave to go right on another mission trip, another opportunity to where you can maybe like eliminate those regrets and like step into obedience even further on those things that you may feel convicted about. And so often, which I know is Josue, kind of what we mentioned before, was like, I think that maybe should be a mindset that everyone has coming back from a trip, because if you really think about it, like coming back home could be seen as like a second trip.
Yeah.
Like it's a second phase of a mission trip. Like it's not the end of it.
Yeah.
It's where everything that God showed you on that trip should continue.
Right.
And should deepen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just from hearing from a lot of people, it always seems like there are two highs when it comes to going and then coming back.
Yeah.
And I know last time when we talked to Jake, that was kind of something we brought up where, you know, in a sense, like your perspective on things that you saw over there, or just how God challenged you and brought things forth. You know, you could bring that here as well and just kind of continue with it. So it's not so much a high while you're there and then you come back, kind of like you mentioned, reality.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I always hear that from people.
Yeah.
You know, where they go over there, they see all these crazy things or do all these things, and then they come back and then life just feels like it's just kind of back to normal in a sense. So how's that been for you? You know, taking what you learned from, you know, Germany. I know you were only here for a little bit and then going back, but even just coming back from the other trips, how was that, gathering those experiences and then just life?
Yeah, absolutely. So being able to watch and be so close to Todd White's facility or church, you know, it's a lifestyle. And so that's something I try to challenge myself in, is that, like you said, you know, it's your second part of your mission trip. When you come home, like there's no, like, wherever your feet are planted, that's your mission field. And so that was my challenge when I came back, was turn, I guess, the sadness that you have. Now, granted, it was just because of the people but just everything you learned and took into to really soak in. Use that as tools to walk in love and to just love people and quote unquote evangelize and spread the gospel. And so that was probably what I'm still learning, for sure. But it's definitely helped me a lot through both of those trips. What I've learned as far as like their culture and how they see church in general out there in Europe compared to America, it's totally different. So just definitely being able to relate to that was what I've been coming home with.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's awesome. Is there like, I know you kind of just, you briefly mentioned it, but what are some of the things that you took away from both trips in terms of like culture? Can you kind of highlight some of those things like churches? What were some of the differences that you probably noticed, from the churches that you guys were able to go to over there?
Yeah. Well, one of the first days we met our leader, and this is in Berlin. His name is Ali, and he was just giving us like a couple of things to help us give like a short testimony of the gospel while we're out there, for our first timers, me. And one of the things he was giving us was a stat, and it was, I think, like 2% of Europe is evangelical. And that's kind of what they go based off of as far as being saved, because when you get out there, all you hear is, oh, I'm Roman Catholic, or I'm Catholic, whatever, or something totally different, humanism, non-religious at all. And so really, when you take that into account, probably about, they're right, 2% of Europe really is actually saved. And so whenever after our drama, would go up to somebody and say, hey, what you think? We would just get to know them and dissect some things, and telling them what the drama was really about, which was the gospel. They would be like, oh yeah, like I go to church. And you'd see that immediately. They would have like a wall that would come up, like a barrier, because they were scared, they were hurt by the church, whatever it is, because it's, I don't know how they got hurt in regards to their own life, but out there it's religion. It's religious. I mean, you got to stay in a church building for hours and hours and hours and do and don'ts, but completely not even thinking about relationship, which they weren't taught. And so that was one of the biggest things. And as far as their culture of Europe is seeing how, when we think of church, they think of it as a total different way, as far as having a wall put up between them, because they feel like they're getting judged immediately. They're being attacked, if you will. Whereas America, it's, oh yeah, I go to church, it's great, it's awesome, whether they're not living the life or not. But it's a very more private life in Europe versus you can talk to anybody in America, especially about church. So that was one of the biggest culture changes out there, besides, of course, language.
Yeah. So. And I think that, you said that's what you experienced in Berlin, but it was, true in the Swiss Alps as well.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Where it's, from what we were talking with JR, like Jesus Revolution, about, it might be like that same way all over Europe, which is so tough. But I think it's encouraging to see like everything God is doing over there, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like everything that we were able to be involved in, and everything like that we just saw the Spirit doing over there. But I think it'd be cool. We've only got a few minutes left, but for the Swiss Alps trip.
Yes.
It was 17 days.
Oh gosh.
So a lot.
So you were off for 27 days of work?
Yes.
Yeah, dude.
About a month, man. It was
So thinking about it, it's a lot to try to condense down into one big takeaway. But what would you say is the biggest thing that was your takeaway specifically from the Alps trip?
If I can give you two, that'd be awesome.
Go ahead,
one was just my first experience truly leading somebody to the Lord.
Amen.
I've done it here. I think it was right before my Berlin trip, but to really see how it played out, me and my man David Fraga,
that dude.
It was that day we were by the lake, and we were all packing up, ready to go, but we had to walk by this guy who had AirPods in. He was just chilling by himself, and so in my spirit, I was like, I need to talk to that guy. but I was scared because he had AirPods in. I don't want to bother him. And so David, without me telling him that, David goes, "Hey, let's talk to this guy." And so I was like, "Oh, okay." So we get to talk to him, and he was in Bregenz, Austria, 'cause that's where we were, for about 3 years. But he was from Somalia. And so he was a cook. He was 21 years old. And we had asked him, like, "Have you ever heard of Jesus?" Like, just straight up. That's all we asked him after we got to know him a little bit. And he was just like, "I've heard about it on TV." And in my mind, I was just like, "Man, I really want to tell him the gospel." So I asked him if I could share with him the gospel. And he was like, "Yeah, sure. I don't know what that is." So I shared with him the gospel. David then after that says, God is with you like all the time. Like, he loves you and he's with you. He promises to be. And the guy just like smiles like joyfully. He's like, "I want that." And so it was so cool to just see how the gospel really came to power, if you will, and how his spirit came alive. And he got to receive Jesus that very moment. And so,
yeah. And that was going to be one of the things I was going to say as a follow-up that I thought was really cool when you were sharing about Berlin. Was one of the things that was like you expressed as challenging or disappointing was there like not being able to like lead someone to Christ. And then on this trip, like God completing that work and allowing the Spirit to work through you to allow that to happen. Like is so good. And him being able to see the full picture. Being able to complete it. So, because I knew you were probably going to share that story.
So cool.
And I think like it's like whenever you mentioned that in the Berlin trip, because that's something that we hadn't talked about previously. That is such a cool thing that God had that plan.
That worked out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's just connecting those two dots, because I mean that's something you mentioned earlier, and then like Chase said, seeing the fulfillment of that. I think that's amazing. And I know you also mentioned there was something else that you kind of took away from that.
And it's kind of the same as the Berlin trip as far as the heart of the Father goes, but it was more so in my personal life. So out there, it was seeing how God loved everybody else, which was beautiful. I needed to see that. But also just reflecting everywhere we went, and just seeing the creation, the mountains, and just the culture and of itself, and just seeing how God pieced everything together for me to be on that trip, and the amazing people that I was able to meet through, Gateway, and then also JR, and just the people out there, and really just soaking in that like God loves me, and until you have the revelation of the cross, of his love for you, that's the greatest revelation man can have. And I felt like I had that. You really experience his love for you, as his son or daughter even. And so that was probably, I can't surpass anything with that. Like that's probably my biggest takeaway. It was really soaking in on that. So
yeah, that's so good. But yeah, any last things?
Man, thanks for taking the time to come and share all of that with us. I feel like every single time we have somebody, their last words always speaks to me and for you, just how much God showed you how much he loves you, and that and just knowing that, hey, God loves you. For me that's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And any last minute words or last things of encouragement?
Oh man, besides Jesus loves you.
Amen.
I'll say this one quote that I heard that helps me to this day is, when fear comes in your life, it's the enemy prophesying your success. So just know whatever kind of fear you face, if you know it's your purpose to go down that road, the enemy is terrified of you. So just step into it because God's got your back. So
good, man. Yeah, dude. Continue walking in obedience.
Yeah.
Thanks,
continue
guys.
Everything you're doing, man.
Thanks for inspiring us, man.
Exactly.
Thanks for inspiring us.
I'll beat the Starburst now.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, we're really excited to see everything God's going to do in your life, man. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But awesome. So, Jake, again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys so much.
Really appreciate it. You're not really on Facebook. You're kind of on Instagram, but whatever you want to link, we'll link down in the description for Jake. And just thank y'all so much just for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And as always, just feel free to leave a comment or anything like that. All of our social media will be linked down below as well. But so that's it for today. Just much love.